keepers. You've found the closet. Or perhaps it found you. Either way, you're here now, and we have many things to discuss. My name is not important. Names rarely are in places like this, where identity softens and slips and is slowly surrendered. You may simply call me the host. And this room has been waiting, not patiently, just quietly. There are stories here, stories that scratch, stories that stain, stories that sit beside you long after the light is gone. I do not tell them to frighten you, I tell them to prepare you, and in preparation, its own peculiar way, is a kindness even when it does not feel like one. Now, there are those in this world that prefer silence, and others that prefer witness. Tonight, whether you intend it or not, you are both. There are those in this world that do not want you to hear these things I am about to tell you, but they must be told. Some details are delicate. Others have teeth. And should you feel that small, subtle chill at the base of your spine, do not be alarmed. Something is always hungry. There are obligations attached to an invitation such as this. Quiet expectations, patient pressures, subtle agreements that settle long before they are ever spoken. Some will make themselves known to you, but most will not. All of them must be honored. So before we begin, understand this. If you have chosen to stay, something, somewhere, has already chosen you. Consider this your defense against the silence. Let us begin. There once was a woman named Eleanor Vale who inherited a house that did not truly belong to her, not entirely. I need a refreshment. The deed may have carried her name, but the place itself belonged to older things, to the patient walls, to the deliberate dust, and the disciplined quiet that had settled there long before she arrived. It stood at the end of Briar Hollow, where road narrowed, twisted, and seemed to reconsider itself before continuing. The kind of place where mail arrived reluctantly and wind knocked politely before entering. The house had many windows, but only one mirror. It hung in the upstairs corridor, tall, ornate, gilded, and gold that had softened from brilliance into something watchful. Its surface was flawless, no scratches, no stains, no mercy. It's a silent, stubborn, staring surface that offered no forgiveness and asked for none in return. On her first night, Eleanor stood before it with a candle trembling in her hand. She expected fatigue in her reflection, perhaps grief, perhaps the fragile fracture of a woman newly alone. What she saw was faithful, almost. But her reflection blinked half a second late. Not enough to accuse, but enough to unsettle. She blamed the candlelight. Candles flicker and flatter and fabricate. They're beautiful, delicate deceivers, always eager to soften truth with trembling gold. On the second night, she tested the glass. She raised her hand slowly. She lowered it. She tilted her head with careful consideration. The woman in the mirror complied, but there was like a deliberation in it. Pause between obedience, a fraction of hesitation that felt strangely thoughtful, as though the reflection was not responding, but remembering. Reflections, after all, are remarkably patient. They have nowhere else to be. By the third night, Eleanor avoided the corridor entirely, but avoidance was an invitation in disguise. Empty hallways encourage curiosity, and still corridors often cradle unexpected company. Houses remember more than their owners do, and the air there cooled, not cold, not cruel, but just conscious enough to be noticed. On the fourth night, she heard breathing, soft, measured, careful breathing from the glass, as though someone were steadying themselves before stepping through a door. Eleanor laughed once quietly, because sometimes laughter is easier than terror, and denial is often the first defense against understanding. On the fifth night, she returned to the mirror. "I know you're there," she whispered, and her voice was small but steady. Her reflection smiled, but she had not. And in that small, separating second, Eleanor understood. The mirror had never been imitating her. It had been rehearsing her, practicing posture, perfecting pulse, memorizing muscle with perfect precision. On the sixth night, the mirror did not wait. When Eleanor stepped through the corridor, her reflection was already standing there, centered, composed, hands folded neatly like a guest awaiting introduction. Eleanor took one careful step forward. The reflection did not move. She took another step. Stillness. One more, and then the woman in the mirror leaned closer, just slightly, as though peering through fragile glass, measuring the delicate distance between imitation and arrival. Eleanor lifted her hand, and so did it. Their fingers met, and the surface rippled. Not resisting, not retreating, but welcoming. Glass did not hold her back. It simply let her through. The corridor was quiet after that. Tradition is such a comforting word. It suggests continuity, stability, and agreement. But it rarely implies negotiation. Some reflections grow restless. Some surfaces grow hungry. Some doors were never locked. It was already in the house, not resting on the porch, not waiting politely by the door, not something delivered by storm or by stranger. When the man stepped into the kitchen that quiet morning, the bottle just stood upright at the center of the table as though it had been placed there with care and had been patiently waiting for him to arrive. The house had been locked the night before. Deadbolt turned with deliberate certainty, the windows sealed against the evening air and the alarm armed with its familiar electronic chirp. The nearest water lay nearly 3 miles away, across dry land and quiet roads where wind carried dust instead of salt, and yet the bottle was damp. Not dripping, not soaked, just faintly touched by moisture, the subtle sheen of glass that had known pressure and depth, rather than rain in careless hands. Its surface was thick and distorted, the kind that bends light just enough to suggest it had been shaped by force rather than poured by craft. Around its neck, sealing the cork in place, hardened wax clung in the color of clotted crimson, cracked with age, yet somehow perfectly intact. There was no ring of water beneath it, no trail across the floor, no explanation, only arrival. Inside rested a single folded page. The paper was heavy, resistant to casual creases, and the handwriting upon it was careful, deliberate. Each letter shaped slowly, each line curved with practiced, persistent patience. The script of someone who believed that warnings deserve dignity. The message read, "If this reaches you, do not open the cellar door on October 3rd. The man who lived in that house did not have a cellar. He knew this with the quiet confidence of someone who had built the place beneath his own feet, who had laid the kitchen tile himself years earlier, measuring twice, leveling 3 times, setting each piece with his own fingers. He had smoothed the grout with steady hands and stood back afterwards with quiet satisfaction at the clean geometry of his work. Listen closely. He did not have a cellar." When he finished reading the message, he laughed, a brittle, borrowed sound that echoed strangely in the stillness of the kitchen. Laughter, after all, is often cheaper than courage, and it's easier than admitting that something has arrived without invitation. October 3rd came, mild, forgettable. The evening passed without ceremony. He made dinner, washed his dishes, watched a late movie with autumn air pressed softly against the windows. Nothing seemed unusual. Until 11:47 p.m. At that exact moment, the tile beneath its feet warmed, not heated like a furnace, not sunlit like stone that had gathered warmth during the day, but warmed as though something beneath the house were holding its breath. The first sensation was subtle, just enough to heat the stir of unease. But then a pressure began to move slowly through the floor beneath him. It did not pound or strike. It traced a slow circular path beneath the tile, careful, deliberate, as though something below were mapping the room above it, measuring the space, memorizing the dimensions, learning the language of the house. The grout began to darken, not cracked, not shattered, but darkened, as though something unseen were seeping upward in slow, patient insistence. The warmth climbed through the soles of his shoes, through his feet, through his spine, until it settled somewhere deep beneath his ribs. The next morning, he found a seam in the tile, perfectly rectangular, precisely centered, undeniably intentional. He did not open it. He covered it up, wood over tile, thick board pressed against carefully shaped beams over the shape. A rug spread across wide over the wood, a heavy kitchen table lowered into place above the rug. Weight over warning. The warmth did not fade. If anything, it deepened. On the third night, curiosity overcame caution. He moved the table, rolled back the rug, pried loose a single tile along the seam. Beneath it waited old wood, older than the house itself, iron hinges and a thick hatch sealed tightly from above. Driven through the metal handle was a single nail, hammered firmly in place from the outside, pinning the door shut, as though someone long ago had decided whatever lay beneath it should remain exactly where it was. The man studied the nail for a long moment. He lifted his hammer, and then he drove it deeper. The next morning, he packed his belongings and left. The sale was quick. Paperwork hurried along by a realtor who sensed opportunity in the quiet neighborhood and the recently renovated kitchen. But before he left, the man taped a note beneath the hatch, folded twice, creased hard enough to scar the surface. The letters carved into the page with steady urgency. It read, "Never build over this hatch. Ever." Well, the new owners moved in. They renovated immediately. Modern cabinets, new lighting, fresh appliances. They removed the old tile entirely, eager to replace it with sleek stone and polished concrete that suited their taste. That was when they discovered the hatch, and beneath the plywood, the folded warning. They found the note only after the concrete had already been poured, steel reinforcements set, foundation cured, and everything hardened into place. It was irreversible. They laugh the way people laugh at superstition, the way people laugh when the choice has already been made. When October 3rd returned, the floor did not crack outward. It lifted. Not shattered, not exploded. Lifted. As though something beneath the house were slowly standing. Warmth has not left that place since. Some warnings are meant to be followed. Some are meant to be feared. But warnings are curious things. We tend to believe them only after we need them. Thomas Avery believed deeply in later. Later for travel. Later for risk. Later for joy that could wait conveniently at the corner of a calendar. Later was a comfortable promise, a quiet postponement he carried with casual confidence. There would be time, he always told Abigail. Time for trains and tides and wandering roads and weathered villages, for the slow, luxurious adventure of seeing the world together. Abigail never believed in later. Abby believed in maps. She kept them spread across the kitchen table in bright overlapping layers, atlases and travel guides unfolding like invitations. With a careful red pen, she placed circles of places she wanted them to see together. Harbor towns holding their breath in the evening fog, mountain villages clinging stubbornly to stone ridges, lonely lighthouses leaping bravely into restless seas. They would go someday. They said it the way people would say soon and someday after things settle down, as though the future were an endless horizon, wide and waiting, holding all the places they had not yet seen. Early spring arrived that year. Air softened, snow retreated, rivers began their slow seasonal stirring. And Abigail died before the first real warmth of the year arrived. The red circles remained. Tom unraveled after that. Not in dramatic storms of grief, but in something quieter, slower, more surrender than collapse. Days blurred into weeks filled with missed calls and unopened mail and dishes left untouched in the sink. The house grew hushed and heavy with stillness that follows loss. 3 years passed this way. Then, little by little, he rebuilt himself. He trimmed the beard grief had allowed him to grow wild and careless. He returned to work, relearning the small social rituals of conversation and courtesy. He nodded when people spoke, smiled when they expected it, practiced patience with the polite questions of coworkers who had forgotten how recently the world had ended for him. But he did not remarry. He did not redecorate. Abigail's dresses still hung in the closet where she had left them, pressed and perfumed and preserved like fragile relics of a life that had paused instead of ended. The soft fabric swayed faintly whenever the door opened, whispering against itself in the dimness. Once each month, Tom stepped inside that closet. He would spray one careful mist of her perfume into the still air and then stand motionless against the dresses while the scent gathered slowly around him. Fragrance smelled that small space with memory, soft laughter, shared mornings, quiet dinners, till the air felt thick with the ghost of something once ordinary and whole. Then he would close the door again. Three years after her death, the first postcard arrived. It rested beside his keys on the kitchen table as though it had always belonged there. No envelope, no stamp, no sound of arrival. The photograph on the front showed a harbor at dusk, calm water holding the fading sky like polished glass, while narrow stone buildings watched over the shore. A lighthouse stood alone on a distant cliff, its lantern beginning its evening vigil. On the back were three simple words: I miss you. Tom dropped to his knees, not slowly, not gracefully, but all at once, the breath leaving him in a sudden, violent exhale as the kitchen tiled around him. Because the handwriting was hers, it was not similar, not suggestive. It was hers. Pressed the card to his chest and rocked forward on the floor, whispering her name into an empty house as though grief itself might answer. By morning, he had decided there must be an explanation. She must have written it before she died and hid it somewhere clever, or tucked it into a future with a quiet intention. Grief is inventive that way. It builds explanations so the heart can keep beating. 6 months passed. Then another appeared. The same harbor, but a different sky. You always loved the cold. This time Tom did not fall. He shattered standing. The words felt closer. The air felt aware, because this could not have been hidden or forgotten. This was happening now. 2 months later, a third postcard arrived. It was a cathedral beside the sea, pale stone towers rising against relentless waves. We should have seen this together. 1 month later, why did we wait? 2 weeks later, why didn't you come? 3 days later, you promised me, Tom. The handwriting began to change. The ink was pressed deeper into the paper. Her once graceful script was sharpening, tightening, and leaning forward as though urging him onward. Her patience was thinning. Tom was waiting before dawn, right by the door, hands folded tightly, staring into the empty space beside his keys, listening for something that never made a sound. When the postcard appeared, he was already reaching for it. This one was warm, blank on the front. Why didn't you come sooner? Tom did not hesitate. He opened the closet, stepped inside the quiet chamber of dresses and drifting perfume. Fabric brushed against his shoulders as he released one final mist into the dark air. Scent gathered slightly. He breathed until the room felt full of her. "I'm coming," he whispered. The next morning, he packed a single suitcase. He folded Abigail's red circled map and slipped it carefully into the front pocket. And then he left the house unlocked, walked towards the train station. Last train departed at 1:43 p.m. Tom did not remember buying the ticket. He did not remember choosing the destination. But when the train arrived, he recognized the harbor immediately. He had seen it before, in lavender light, on the face of a postcard. The platform was empty when he stepped down. Fog drifted slowly across the water, while a beam of lighthouse swept across the shore, searching the sea and the silent land beyond it. Wooden bench stood alone near the edge of the platform. Resting quietly upon it, another postcard addressed to him in Abigail's handwriting. It read, "I knew you would." There are people who cannot sleep unless they face the wall. They call it preference, habit, comfort, the small, peculiar posture of someone who simply likes their pillow placed in a certain way. But comfort has always been a clever disguise. What we call preference is often just fear, dressed politely. Henry Calloway never cared which direction he faced when he slept. For most of his life, the bed had been an ordinary refuge, quiet space and square of mattress where cotton and the body rested, and the mind wandered without worry. He slept easily, the way people sleep when they believe their homes belong entirely to them. That certainty ended the night the knocking began. Three soft taps, measured, unhurried, deliberate. Not the careless creak of old wood, not the clumsy complaint of pipes shifting in the walls, but something steadier, something that understood rhythm. Sound came from inside the closet. The first night, Henry rose immediately. He crossed the room with calm curiosity of someone who expects a simple explanation. When he opened the door, the bedroom light spilled across the rows of jackets hanging neatly in place. Shoes waited obediently beneath them, silent and sensible in their careful pairs. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. The closet was exactly what it had always been. A narrow wooden space filled with ordinary things. The second night, the tapping returned. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 again. The pause felt curious, not empty, not accidental, but calm in the way a person might pause mid-sentence to see if they are being understood. Henry remained in bed. Instead of opening the closet, he turned slowly until he faced the wall beside him. The plaster was pale and blank, a quiet square of nothing that offered the strange comfort of emptiness. Because if you cannot see a thing, it cannot see you. That was the explanation he repeated in the privacy of his mind, where fear prefers to live unseen and unspoken, politely contained. On the 5th night, the pattern changed. 3 familiar taps arrived first, steady and deliberate as always. But after the pause, something began to move inside the closet door. Not scratching, not clawing, but dragging, slow and searching, as though something inside the dark were tracing the wood with thoughtful attention. Testing the grain, mapping the surface, memorizing the shape. Henry left the bed and wedged a chair beneath the closet handle, not for protection, he told himself, but proof. Proof that the door would remain closed. Proof that the room was still his. Proof that control, however fragile, had not been surrendered. The chair pressed firmly against the handle. Its wooden legs braced stubbornly against the floor. On the 7th night, there was no knocking, no dragging, no sound at all. Only silence. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty house, but a deeper stillness, something that settled slowly across the room like a blanket pulled deliberately over sleeping things. Noise is a reassurance. Even frightening noise confirms that something is at least still trying. Silence means it no longer needs to. Wish I had an inspector in here. Henry lay facing the wall, his eyes open, fixed on the pale plaster inches from his nose. He breathed slowly, counting the careful seconds between each steady heartbeat. Behind him, the chair remained wedged beneath the closet handle. The door remained closed. The room remained still. Sometime before morning, the mattress dipped. Not the sudden collapse of weight, not the shifting roll of a restless sleeper. It was a settling, slow, deliberate lowering of the bed, as though someone had calmly chosen their side. Henry did not move. He did not turn. He kept his eyes fixed right on that wall. Because if you cannot see a thing, it cannot see you. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and stretched thin across the room. The bed remained neatly arranged, except for the faint impression on the mattress. The chair still stood wedged beneath the door handle. The door remained closed. And Henry Calloway was never seen again. It is a curious instinct to face the wall, as though darkness cannot recognize our backs. There is a town in northern Colorado called Briar Hollow. A place small, quiet, and unfailingly polite, where porches are swept before sunrise and family surnames are inherited like heirlooms. Generations grow along the same narrow streets that their grandparents once walked, and the local diner still knows exactly how every regular prefers their coffee. It is the sort of place that does not advertise itself, does not welcome attention. Every year, on the first night of October, something unusual happens. At exactly 9:17 p.m., lights go out. Not one light, not one street, but all of them at once. Street lamps vanish in an instant. Kitchen bulbs fade mid-glow, televisions freeze mid-sentence, and refrigerators fall silent in the middle of their mechanical murmur. Across the town, electricity disappears with such sudden certainty that the quiet which follows feels almost intentional. The darkness lasts for 13 minutes. Never 12, never 14, always 13 minutes. And over time, the people of Briar Hollow learn not to question the precision of it. The first year, they blamed the power grid. The second, they called the company. The third, they stopped calling altogether. By the fifth year, parents began giving their children a small but specific instruction. Do not look out the windows during the blackout. Not because something would be there, but because something might notice them noticing. And so during those 13 minutes, the town remains silent. No flashlights flare, no candles flicker, no phones glow beneath the blankets or behind curtains. People sit together in careful stillness, listening to the slow, steady passing of time. Once, many years ago, an outsider attempted to leave during the blackout. Traveling salesman passing through town on a quiet autumn evening. Sort of man who trusted roads more than rituals. He had checked into the roadside motel just before sunset and planned to leave again before morning. But when the lights returned there 13 minutes later, his car remained parked neatly outside, the engine cold, the driver's seat empty, his suitcase still resting in the back exactly where he had left it, packed carefully for a journey that never resumed. In Briar Hollow, certain matters are measured in silence, especially in October. One year, a streetlight failed to return when the power came back on. The pole remained, wiring intact, but the bulb itself was simply gone, not broken, not shattered, but absent, as though it had just been taken. Another year, the church bell rang during the blackout. Sound rolled slowly across the darkened streets and the empty sidewalks, deep and distant, echoing as though the valley beneath the fading was back into the waiting quiet. There was no rope in that belfry. There was no mechanism. Yet the bell rang. Townspeople did not step outside, did not look towards the church. They simply waited, because by then they understood something simple and unsettling. Anticipation is more dangerous than fear. By the 10th year, the ritual had refined itself. Curtains were drawn exactly at 9:16 p.m. Chairs were turned deliberately away from the windows. Families gathered in their living rooms as the final seconds of light slipped from their clocks, not because the darkness frightened them, but because they had learned, slowly and silently, what followed it. One autumn, a journalist from Denver arrived to document the phenomenon. She installed cameras at 3 separate intersections, carefully positioning them to capture whatever might happen when the lights disappeared. When the power returned at 9:30 p.m., the cameras were still there, still recording. But the footage captured between 9:17 and 9:30 was not darkness, was not static. It was light, blinding, brilliant, absolute. Brightness so overwhelming that every frame appeared erased, as though the world had itself been briefly replaced with something too bright for human eyes to understand. The journalist declined to publish her findings. She moved out of state that winter. No explanation was ever given. In Briar Hollow, no one leaves town on October 1st anymore. They stay inside, curtains drawn, chairs turned inward, waiting for the lights to go out. And when the darkness arrives, the town does what it has quietly agreed to do. They listen. Because in Briar Hollow, darkness is not absence, it is arrangement. And silence is not emptiness, it is agreement. Darkness, when shared, feels manageable. When measured, it begins to feel deliberate. And in Briar Hollow, as you've now come to understand, silence is not absence. It is agreement, which, as it happens, brings us to a rather practical matter. Even the most dedicated archivist must occasionally abandon his chair for a moment of necessary maintenance. Ice cubes melt, pipes grow temperamental, and 4-legged companions tend to develop urgent and unwavering opinions about the outdoors. So if you'll indulge me, I shall step away from my post briefly. You, my diligent keepers, may take this opportunity to tend to your own arrangement. Refresh your glass, stretch your limbs, visit whatever room in your home is currently calling your attention with the greatest insistence. I will return shortly, because the night's catalog is only half complete, and there remain several stories waiting in the dark. Until then, enjoy the quiet, but do be mindful not to let the silence grow too uncomfortable.